Hi, good day everyone. So for today, what we'll be tackling about is why there's a need for us to study literature. So again, let me begin this talk by asking you once again, why do we study literature? Okay, so of course, many will tell, why do we care about literature? My course is not related to literature, so some of you are taking up engineering courses, business related courses, or courses that are not related to arts or specifically in literature. In my case, way back in college, I'm taking up Bachelor of Arts, wherein I major journalism, so I understand that there's really a need for me to study literature. It's for me to explore literature in general, to study how it was written, the techniques of the writers, which will eventually be beneficial in my part once I graduated from college. Okay, so others do take business courses, engineering courses, or non-related courses. So why do they care of literature? So can we get money from literature? Some do so. Is it really essential to our lives? So those are some of the questions that we ask. Why are we studying literature? Some are just forced to take this subject because it is part of their curriculum. If they were not able to pass the subject, they will not be able to finish their degree. So basically, that's their very reason why they are um, forced to take this course. However, aside from that, there is a need for us to realize its essence, to realize the value of literature in our lives and how it affects humanity in general. Okay, so let me begin this mentioning to you about Plato's The Republic, wherein, according to Plato, he said that philosophy is more important than literature. That's what he was arguing before in one of his work, which is the Republic. So in the Republic, he was attacking Iliad and Odyssey by Homer, wherein according to him, Iliad and Odyssey were just promoting immorality, wherein that is far beyond what is expected from a body of knowledge. Because during his time, Plato would focus on philosophy, considering that he is a philosopher, wherein his teaching dealt more on human lives in general, telling people about the importance of knowledge that can be gotten from studying philosophy. And by that time, there is already an emergence of poetry because of the popularity of Homer. And we all know that Iliad and Odyssey is not written, it is told orally. So there was Homer retelling the stories of Iliad and Odyssey among his students. And during that time, Plato had already established a school which he called the Academy. And in the Academy, what he was teaching was more of on philosophy. And he was attacking Homer's work because nga, according to him, it is promoting immorality. Years passed, there was Aristotle. When we all know that Aristotle is the student, a very well-known student of Plato. So, although Aristotle is the student of Plato, they do have this differing view when it comes to literature. So, Aristotle defended that literature is important to us, to our lives, to attain pleasure. So when we talk of pleasure, we're not pertaining to sexual desire or anything. But what we refer to pleasure, it has something to do with satisfying our own desire, our wants. It's not just about sex. So let's say, for example, you find enjoyment from reading literature, and that enjoyment that you feel is already a form of pleasure. Let's say, for example, you get a lot of knowledge, a lot of insights from reading literature, and that insight alone that satisfies your knowledge, then that can be considered as a pleasure. So that is for Aristotle. So they are different when it comes to the importance of literature. For Aristotle, literature reflects life. Since it reflects life, we can learn from it. However, Plato would argue that literature is only just um, it's not reflecting the reality about life. It is corrupting the minds of the people because according again to Plato, it's still philosophy that is the highest form of source of knowledge, not literature. And Aristotle is not contradicting that factor. But for Aristotle, what he wanted to focus on is more of the importance of literature in giving us pleasure. And that pleasure again is more of satisfying our wants, our desire, be that an information, be that a knowledge, or be that a gratuity or anything. So provided now for as long as you are reading literature, you have that sense of satisfaction that you would like to achieve, then that is already pleasure. So for Aristotle, um, that's the importance of literature in our lives. And years passed. It was during the period of Leo Tolstoy, wherein Tolstoy, which who is a known writer of Anna Karenina, a very known novel, he published an essay. The essay is entitled "What is an Art?" What is an art? And as we all know, literature is a form of art. And according to Tolstoy, the essence of art is a form of expression. If you are the writer, or if you are the author of that particular work, or if you are an artist, a painter, or a sculptor, or any form of arts, so that is your form of expression. And if that is your form of expression, you are transcending the message that you would like to convey to those who are viewing your work. So for him, the importance of art is on part of the artist himself or herself. That it is a way of the artist to freely express his or her thoughts on a different form of arts. Be it in visual form or be it in performative form, anything. So for him, he's focusing on the self-expression, that who are we to argue of the message of that particular artwork if for the artist that is his own or her own masterpiece. So for Tolstoy, it's more of self-expression, and that's the essence of art to him. Specifically for pertaining to literature, that's the essence of literature. Diba, we will write poems, we write essay, we write stories, because it's our form a form of our self-expression. Then we have Philip Sidney, who was attacked during his time because they are mobilizers. They do have this movement. They form a movement wherein they would like to focus on delving into the minds of the public of the importance of poetry. So it's called movement because there are groups which was led by Philip Sidney during his time. So he defended literature, that literature, just like what Aristotle and Tolstoy mentioned, it's very important on the lives of the people, for it is reflecting the truth about life. That's what Philip Sidney believed in. And for him, we can learn from studying poetry. Okay, so those are some points that we have to ponder on based on the view of Plato, Aristotle, Tolstoy, and Philip Sidney when it comes to the essence of literature, on why we are studying literature. So to encapsulate that, so we can say that what do we get from literature? It boils down into three things. One, entertainment. We are entertained by reading literature. Okay? Second, we can learn about our past. If you happen to read a lot of stories that deals with different setting, different time, most of them are well studied, wherein during their times, they wrote that particular literary work, and what they are observing during their time were reflected on their works. So by merely reading their literary works, we can realize its importance to the past because they are recording the events. Third, we can reflect from literature about human life condition. Ano ba ng mga human life condition? So what are these human life condition? it it goes to show that literature has something to do with uh, reflecting about our human mind. Okay, let's say what's going on in our head. So let's say, for example, we are into to studying the behavior of an individuals. Then why is it that particular character behave that way? And once we encounter the same situation with that kind of person, then we were able to grasp some idea from studying literature. Let's say, for example, in uh, in one of the novels, like Fifty Shades of Grey. So why is it that uh, Christian Grey have that kind of sexual behavior? Okay, why is it somehow it is somehow masochist? So why? Okay, so we realize that he has a trauma. Now, considering that condition of an individuals, we will able to grasp some idea from literature. Okay, so aside from the human life condition, we are also referring to how a person relate to others. We can see how these different characters are involved in a lot of catastrophic incidents wherein they learn something from those catastrophic incidents that they had encountered. Then that makes sense about studying or reading literature. Third, alongside with that, is about the societal condition. Many of the literary works are reflecting the society in general. So let's say, for example, when we are studying the works of Rizal, they, so we learn about how people were treated during their time during the Spanish period. Okay, so those are is only just some example of societal condition that can be reflected in literature. Now, let's have some other examples other than those that I have mentioned a while ago. So in Iliad and Odyssey, which was attacked by Plato during his time, and yet defended by Aristotle. So in Iliad and Odyssey, we had a lot of realizations of society in general. Let's say politics, treatment to women, sexual desire, among others. So it is indeed a masterpiece of ancient time, which is still perennial. When talk of perennial, even up to this day, we are still studying it. So it has been many centuries ago, and yet we are studying this masterpiece, in which their context can still be manifested in the present time. Again, the context that is reflected in Iliad and Odyssey can still be manifested in this present time. Okay, so as we go through with our lecture of Iliad and Odyssey, we will be realizing what are those um, social contexts that are still reflected during our time. So it seems like our experience of the past that are reflected in literature is keep on repeating. Okay, keep on repeating. Then we have Les Miserables. I have here a book of Les Miserables. Okay, so in Les Miserables, which was written by Victor Hugo. So we follow the lives of John Valjean. Okay, so John Valjean. So John Valjean was convicted because he just steal a loaf of bread because um he, his family was hungry at the time. So he just stole a loaf of bread, and then because of that piece of bread, he was imprisoned for many years. So very long years. And what can we get from that? Injustice. So um, there's no proof as to up to what extent is the cause of his violation. There's no proof. It's just so happened that he was so uh, that he was seen stealing a loaf of bread and he was imprisoned for long years. Okay, so it is a reflection of how poverty brought him to injustice and imprisoned him for many years. And more importantly, there's the other side of the story, which is also one of the highlights of the story, which is the Civil War. We see their Civil War and how the lives of John Valjean interplay with those people who are involved with Civil War. Of course, we understand what Civil War is. So if the people of a certain country was revolting against their government, then that is a civil war. So it is a manifestation of what will happen if there is an oppression in our society. Civil war may exist or may happen anytime if the government is keep on oppressing us. And if you're going to study Les Miserables, so there's a tendency, there's a possibility that it will happen in our country. Although during the time of EDSA revolution, we see how people work together to fight against uh, the ruler of Marcus, how Marcus ruled during the time. And we see how people worked together when they ousted Joseph Estrada way back in 1999. So all of this, that is not an example of a civil, but we can see from there how the power of the people, or what they call the people power, uh, can oust a leader, and that is reflected in Les Miserables. So Les Miserables was written many years ago. Okay, then we have your Jane Austen. Okay, so this is one of the work of Jane Austen, which is Sense and Sensibility. Alongside with Sense and Sensibility is Pride and Prejudice. So Pride and Prejudice, which is one of the which were two of the majestic works over time during the Romantic period. She portrayed a woman who did not conform to society. Jane Austen, by her by experience or by looking at her biography, we can really see how she wanted women to be empowered during her time. So she portrayed a woman who did not conform to society, wherein during her time, if you want to have a better life, it is either you come from a wealthy family or you will marry a wealthy man. So that's your only way in order for you to have a better life. So hers is different. Jane Austen's life is different. She was fortunate that her family supported her education. Her observation of their society during her time were reflected on these two novels. So we can really see the similarities of the main characters in Pride and Prejudice and in Sense and Sensibility, wherein her message in the novel is more of empowering women. Empowering women. If you read it, then you can really see what I'm telling you. So there's a film which you can use as your reference in order for you to understand Pride and Prejudice. So you can really see there how Elizabeth, which I think Elizabeth is Jane Austen herself. Okay, Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice is Jane Austen herself. You can really see the similarities of their behavior. So if you're just going to read the biography of Jane Austen. Okay, so moving forward in the present period, so we have here, wala, I don't have a hardbound copy or a copy of 50 Shades of Grey, but I do have my ebook copy when I read it way back 2010, 2014 or 13 when I read it. So 50 Shades of Grey. I'm sure that all of you are particular of this very sensual film that is for adults only. It rated SPG ito. And I am sure you know why. And 50 Shades of Grey. So it follows the life of Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele. Okay, so how their relationship grow into a more from um, from Anastasia being submissive to Christian Grey's desire, sexual desire. But far beyond that sexual desire that is um, reflecting on this story is why is it Christian Grey behave that way? Secondly, why Anastasia still is accepting that kind of behavior? What is the process of Anastasia still of accepting it? So is it plainly a desire, sexual desire, or is there love? Okay, so on a psychosexual perspective, we can really understand where Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele is coming from. Okay, so and with this kind of literary work, we can understand people who would have the same experience. Okay, so it's not only just for us reader to be satisfied of our own sexual desire, but it's more of understanding the psychology of individuals, especially if they are traumatized. Christian Grey was traumatized. He has a trauma when he was, since he was still a kid, because he was sexually molested by an adult. Okay, that's why he was behaving this way. He is behaving this way. Okay, so understanding the psyche of the person can be understood, specifically on sexual desire that is brought by a trauma, can be reflected in 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, so and next we have Harry Potter. Okay, I'm sure that all of you had read Harry Potter or had watched Harry Potter series. Okay, I remembered I read the first three books. Although when you're reading the book itself, it's really it does not conform with with the right grammar, because the way the characters pronounce it in the film is the way it was written in the book. So there's really a slang, a British accent that are reflected in the film or in the novel itself. Okay, so but this is a very brilliant story. However, what do we get from this? Is it all about magic? It's not all about magic. It's not all about those spells. So we get to see the value of relationship in the story. We get to see the value of relationship in the story. We all know that Harry Potter was has no parents, so technically he is an orphan. So he was just adopted by her aunt. Okay, wherein he had a strange relationship with her aunt and her uncle and her cousin, his cousin. So the friendship in how others treated Harry like their own son, despite him being not of their relatives, is reflected in the story. Okay, yung somehow you get to see a family that is not blood related to you, who treated you like their own blood. Okay, treat you like your own blood. The Wesleys, Dumbledore, some of his teachers. So they treated Harry as their own family. And also, we get to see bullying in the classrooms or in school. Bullying from fellow students, bullying from their teachers. Okay, so we are able to see those situations, those scenarios that that are prevalent up to this day. So um, next we have the Divergent. Okay, Divergent. Of course, its part two is Insurgent. So I watch both Divergent and Insurgent, and also we have Hunger Games, which has a three parts. I think three parts. The the last part was divided into two parts in the film. Okay, so it is a trilogy. Okay, so Divergent, Insurgent, and Hunger Games. So what are the similarities of these two? So in Divergent And in Hunger Games, we see how political affairs manipulate the lives of the many. It may be a different government that we are following in our country, but we were able to see how the manipulation in the government can happen. So theirs is more of dictatorial. Dictatorial. It's the government that is dictating what will happen in their government or in their society. Although we are, sabi nila, democratic country yet. Okay, so you know what I mean. It is actually happening in our society. That manipulation by the government is happening in our society, not only in the Philippines but also in many parts of the world. So we see women empowerment. So when trees of Divergent and Katniss Everdeen of Hunger Games mobilize their people to be against or to fight against the government, it's an implication of a civil war which might happen if the government is keep on oppressing its people. So oppression in the government are reflected in these stories. Okay, so those are reflected in Divergent and Hunger Games. Okay, so I still have here some of the books that I have read already. So this is a Black Like Me. It's very old. It was written by John Howard Griffin. So what this is a documentary. So John Howard Griffin is an American, a white American. So what he did was it was the time wherein there is still racism in America. So he wanted to do some research, to do some documentary in the form of this, and then wrote about his own experience. So Black Like Me, from the title itself, he he pretended to be black. So he shaved his hair and then he changed his color pigment so to be look like a black man. Okay, so he used a dark pigment. Of course, during the time there's already the technology that can change his dark complexion. So he immersed himself to the people in the South, wherein most of those people in the South were black. And during that time, kasi there is a separation. Let's say for the comfort room, there is this is a comfort room for black and it's a comfort room for white people. So he immersed himself just like a black man. So he detailed here everything about his experience, wherein his life was threatened because of this book when it was published. So because it reflected how white discriminated the black. Although, ironically, he himself is a white man, okay? And he got to experience what it feels like to be black, okay? So that's why it's titled Black Like Me. And of course, who I was very much delighted when I read this book. Okay, so New Moon, of course, it's part of the series and Twilight. Okay, so although it's more of romance, but again, its essence is for us to be entertained. So we feel pleasure if we do watch or read this book. Okay, so it's more pleasure. It's more of being entertained. But again, we see here uh, the usual kind of love that you will do everything for the sake of your love. That regardless of your differences, for as long love is there, then you will do everything you want. Okay, so I think it's more of that. But many people read the book, many like it, many love it, and although there's already a lot of stories about vampire and man having a relationship before, but it is something new on part of the readers because of the element that it is giving us different element, different flavor, superpower, magic, action, and Stephanie Meyer really wrote this novel magnificently because you will be able to imagine what's happening in the story. Let's say, for instance, you did not watch the film, but you're able to read the book. By just merely reading the book, you'll be able to imagine what's happening in the story. And of course, in the contemporary period in the Philippines, there is this Ladlad, which is a three-part series, Ladlad. Okay, so Ladlad 1, Ladlad 2, Ladlad 3. So way back in college kasi, we do have our um, literature subjects, wherein one of the readings that we discuss is about Ladlad. So it's a collection of gay stories, reflection of the experiences, dreams, wants, inhibitions of writers, different gay writers, which was compiled in a book by Neil Garcia and Danton Remoto, known writers, known essayists in the Philippines. And of course, we've got to see a lot of. I'm reading this American literature book. It is a compilation of different literary works of literature in America in the contemporary period, just like Sylvia Plath, Wood, etc. So it is through literature that we are freed from boredom because we are being entertained. It is through literature that we realize things about ourselves because we are reflecting from those that we read. And to think of those, a lot of things, considering a lot of those things that I mentioned a while ago, that for me is the essence of studying literature. So that will be all. Thank you very much for spending your time. So next meeting, what I'll be discussing is the history of word literature.